Right, so if I can't convince you to stop playing the game, then the least I could do is to teach you everything that you need to know in order to get whatever rank you want to be, so that way you don't have to play the game longer than you have to. So this will be the first installment of the series, and in this video, I'm just going to go over all the things in Champion Select that will predict the outcome of a game pretty reliably. So here we go. Champion Select is the only opportunity that you have to dodge unwinnable games. So the question becomes, how do you recognize these unwinnable games? Right. The first way to recognize an unwinnable game is if your ally team has all one damage type and the enemy team drafts a bruiser or a tank. So the reason why is because a bruiser or tank has access to item selections that directly counter multiple members of your team in such a way that you don't have an answer to it. So, for example, if your team is full AD, so let's say you have Riven top lane, Lee Sin jungle, you have Zed mid, you have Caitlyn AD carry, and let's say that you have a support like, oh, I don't know, like something like Pantheon support or something like that, right? And the enemy team drafts a Malphite. If the game goes through, the Malphite wants to build armor against all the members of your team and also for the champion's own passive. And this means that that character is now effective against every single member of your team, right? So if that champion gets a lead of any sort, then all of the members of your team suffer, right? Meaning that your likelihood of success is pretty slim. Additionally, it's not just a tank character or a bruiser character in the top lane that has access to these resistance options, right? If the enemy team drafts a mage in the middle lane, right, and an AD carry bottom, then they have access to items like Zanya's Hourglass, which grants 50 armor, and Guardian Angel for the AD carry, which also grants 50 armor. And these are items that also have stats which directly benefit the champions themselves. So, for example, if you're going a mage mid and you build Zanya's, then you get 105 AP and armor, which are two stats that either A, directly empower the champion via the AP, or directly reduce the effectiveness of every member on your team, being the armor. And the same can be said with the GA with a 55 AD and the 50 armor. So, with that said, if you ever see a team composition where your team has all single damage type and the enemy team drafts a bruiser or a tank, it's probably a good sign to dodge. Lose 5 LP as opposed to 25 LP. The second pattern that tells you that a game is lost is if every member of your team is only good at a single point of the game. So, for example, if you have a team composition where you have like an Aurelion Soul mid, a Smolder bot lane, a Sona support, you have like a King jungle or a Kindred jungle, and you have in the top lane, I don't know, something like Ornn, right? That team composition is very great in the late game, but there's no guarantee of getting to that stage, right? In fact, it is more likely that you lose the game before you get to the point of time where every champion is good than it is that you actually reach that point. So, for that reason, that is also a very good opportunity to dodge. And the same thing is true if you're looking at the opposite, where it's an early game team. So, let's say that you have something like, oh, I don't know, like a Callista bottom lane, and you have a uh, like a Blitzcrank support. In the middle lane, you have something like Zed. In the jungle, you have, let's say, Lee Sin, and in the top lane, you have, I don't know, something something like Riven, let's say. Well, Riven's early to mid, but it'll work for this example. So in this case, if the game goes later than, let's say, 25 minutes, right? If you're not able to secure enough of an advantage prior to that point, or if you give shutdown gold to the enemy team, then you give them access to an opportunity to enter into the late game, which thereby means that your champions are no longer effective and theirs will come out on top, just due to game duration at that point. So yeah, so far I would keep track of team damage types. So make sure that your team has mixed damage types, and that the enemy team can't just build one thing to answer. And second, making sure that your team is good at a variety of ranges throughout the game. So that way, the enemy team doesn't have to just focus on surviving up until a certain point to win, or ending the game before a certain point in order to win. Okay, so this third point is a lot more specific. It has to do with the actual champion choices and character classes of the of your team. So you need an AD carry in your team composition, and if not, then you need to have something that replaces the job of an ADC. What do I mean by this? An AD carry provides consistent attack damage to either turrets or objectives like neutral monsters, so Baron and dragons, right? This is very, very important. This is something that you need to have on your team, or else you're going to lose games more times than not. However, I will add that if you have something like a Yone or a Yasuo somewhere in the game that can replace this function, or if you have something like even an Aurelia, right? An auto attack based champion, you can get away with having a mage in the bottom lane as an APC, right? The important part though is having an auto attack based like champion somewhere in your team composition that can scale pretty well. Once you have this component, you're also going to need some form of engaged champion too. So this might be in the form of, let's say, a tank with a reliable engage tool in the top lane. So Malphite again, Ornn again, things like that. This might be a dive champion somewhere in the middle lane. So something like Diana would be pretty strong here. Alternatively, this could be uh, some force in the jungle. So like Sejuani isn't as meta these days. But a jungler like Amumu would be very strong and reliable engage, which is very helpful for the team composition as well. You really need some form of engage with these champion types and classes, and if you don't have it anywhere on the team composition, then all of your team fights will go poorly, essentially. You can't 5v5 against another team if you don't have some form of engage or frontline. And I do mean either or, because having both is obviously ideal. However, in solo queue, you only really need one or the other in order for your AD carry to have the space to operate. So that's also another reason why it's very important that you have these sorts of champions that are auto attack based damage dealers that have some form of AD damage that they dish out in these auto attacks, because that is how you deal with the tanks on the enemy team. These three are the most reliable ways of knowing when to dodge versus when not to dodge. So to recap, the first way is if either team has all one damage type. If it's your team that has all one damage type and the enemy team drafts like a bruiser or a tank, that's a dodge. Alternatively, if it's flipped, your team has the Bruiser tank and the enemy team has drafted all one damage type, you certainly want to play that game because it's a free win. Secondly, if either team drafts for only one stage of the game, be it early game or late game, that team is most likely going to lose. So if that's your team, it's probably a good idea to dodge. And if it's the enemy team, then it's a good idea to play out the game because it's a free win if you play accordingly. And finally, if either team does not draft a marksman champion or an auto attack based AD damage dealer, then that team will lose the game. And more than that, if either team drafts an auto attack damage based damage dealer but doesn't have either someone to stand as frontline or reliable engage, then that team will also lose in team fight situations and circumstances. The truth is, players being toxic in champ select, for example, is not always the most reliable predictor of the game outcome, primarily because you can't tell how players are actually going to respond in the match itself, right? I've been in about a 50-50 split myself of players who are toxic in champ select and they're toxic in game, but then also players who are toxic in champ select and actually just like really good in game. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I will say that like if we were at a time when you can look players up, then seeing whoever's first timing a champion would be a strong indication of when to dodge. Anyone first timing, you would dodge the game. If we were at a time where you could check people's ratings out before the game started, then that would also be a strong predictor, and in fact would be the strongest predictor of the game. But that is no longer available to solo queue players. So not much that you can really do there. But I think that the methods that I have illustrated within this video are strong enough for you to get to a pretty high rating, pretty high ELA rating. I mean, I peaked at Emerald, right? So speaking from experience, I think that these are some of the tactics for champion select that will get you pretty far, pretty far. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more in the future, please like, comment, and subscribe. Yes.